I want to talk about vaccine mandates really fast. Because here is what Joe Biden used to say about vaccine mandates.
No.
So somebody asked him, it's okay, do you think vaccines should be mandatory? That's the question. And he says no. Watch, listen.
No, I don't think it should be mandatory. I wouldn't demand to be mandatory, but I would do everything in my power. Just like I don't think masks have to be made mandatory nationwide.
So that was Joe Biden last year in 2020. Joe Biden, COVID vaccinations in U.S. will not be mandatory. That was from December 2020. December 5th, 2020. Fauci, even Dr. Fauci, this is from August 2020. Dr. Fauci said, everyone has the right to refuse a vaccine. If someone refuses the vaccine in the general public, then there's nothing you can do about that. You cannot force someone to take a vaccine, he said. What changed? Well, here's Nancy Pelosi.
So here's the thing. We cannot require someone to be vaccinated. That's just not what we can do. It is a matter of privacy to know who is or who isn't.
Well, guess what? Everything's different now. Sweeping new vaccine mandate for 100 million Americans. And there are unintended consequences from this. You know, people think that they're dunking on red states. Do you know that in New York, can you look up the vaccination rates of African Americans in New York City? Because I was, the last time I checked, it was very high because they are, and that's the thing people don't want to tell you. That's who you're talking to. Here's school bus drivers in Chicago quit.
As of August 12th, only about 28% of young black New Yorkers are vaccinated.
So as of August 12th, 28% of young African Americans in New York are vaccinated.
And that's compared to 48% of Latinos, and that's from the New York Times.
So from the New York Times, and 48% of Latinos are vaccinated. So that means the majority of Latinos are not vaccinated, and the majority of young African Americans are not vaccinated. The overwhelming 72%. So that's who you're talking to. And Joe Biden's losing his patience. You know who I'm losing my patience with? I'm losing my patience with Joe Biden not giving health care to people. Because 200,000 people would be alive today if we had Medicare for all. So that's the elites mismanaging their COVID pandemic. If we had Medicare for all, 200,000 people would be alive today. But they want you to get angry at the school bus driver. That's what they want you to be angry at. A school bus driver. Chicago Public Schools say 10% of their school bus drivers quit on Friday as they're unwilling to get mandated vaccine. The district is now offering cash to parents who drive their kids to school. $1,000 a month. If you could hire an Uber, they'll say, get an Uber to drive your kid to school. Do you think the Uber driver is vaccinated? Every Uber driver I've asked is not vaccinated, FYI. Whenever I ask, they're not. So now they're not going to go on their school bus, but they're going to have random people from Uber pick them up and take them to school. Workers rally against New York Presbyterian's COVID vaccine mandate for staff. That is from Wednesday, September 1st. The frontline healthcare workers went from heroes to zeros. Police unions, guess who's not mandated? Police unions across the country look to stop the mandatory vaccination among officers. I know in Portland, Oregon, they can't at least in Portland, Oregon, I know that they can't mandate that the cops get vaccinated. So who's going to be enforcing the vaccinations? An unvaccinated cop is going to now write you a ticket or for you not being. It sounds crazy. Well, that's the world we're living in. None of this makes sense. Of course, the elites are mismanaging COVID 100%. Of course, they're doing it the wrong way. Of course, they're going to have a $5 trillion upward transfer of wealth while they tell you to go home, quit your job, and they're not going to give you any money when you stay home. Of course, they're going to mismanage it 100%. And now the cops are not going to abide by this. LAPD officers sue city over COVID-19 vaccination requirement. What? So the cops aren't going to abide by this. The cops aren't going to abide by the law. What does this tell you? It tells you that Joe Biden, Fauci, and Nancy Pelosi were correct last year when they said you can't force someone to take a medical procedure.
What changed?
What changed? Your mishandling of the COVID crisis? Your unbelievable mishandling of the COVID crisis? Kyle Kalinske says Biden's new vaccine mandate, he puts it in quotes, is hardly a mandate if you also get the option of testing once a week for the virus, which you do. And anybody who isn't telling you that is being dishonest. Well, that's a pretty dishonest tweet. Got 8,000 likes, but it's super dishonest. First of all, I just want to break down the anti-logic of it. Biden's new vaccine mandate is hardly a mandate if you also get the option of doing this other mandate. Those are mandates. Those are things. And by the way, who's going to pay for that testing? The worker. And they have to schedule time to go do it. And they got kids and they got things and they got working 2 and 3 jobs. So it's hardly a mandate because they have the option of doing another mandate. But guess what? He's telling you anybody who's telling you other than that is being dishonest. Well, guess who's being dishonest? Mr. doesn't know what corruption means is being dishonest. Biden to mandate COVID vaccine for federal workers, removing the option to get tested instead. Thursday's order will remove the option for rigorous testing. So I know someone's bending over backwards to pat Joe Biden on the back these days, but that's all bullshit. 100%. And that's crazy, finding reasons for this authoritarianism. Guess who used to be against? Guess who used to foment people being vaccine hesitancy? Guess who fomented vaccine hesitancy? You want to see?
When we finally do, God willing, get a vaccine, who's going to take the shot? Who's going to take the shot? You can be the first one to say, sign me up. They now say it's okay. If the president.
Who was the one who fomented vaccine hesitancy? It was Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Want to see it again? I'll show you.
When we finally do, God willing, get a vaccine, who's going to take the shot? Who's going to take the shot? You can be the first one to say, sign me up. They now say it's okay. If the president announced tomorrow we have a vaccine, would you take it? Only if it was completely transparent, that other experts in the country could look at it. Only if we knew all of what went into it.
If Donald Trump can't give answers and his administration can't give answers to these 3 questions, the American people should not have confidence.
But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it.
Who is fomenting vaccine hesitancy? Who's doing that? It looks like our president and vice president were the ones doing that. What changed? Oh, they're in power. So it's okay to have questions. It's okay to not trust the government. It's okay to foment vaccine hesitancy as long as you're not in power. If you can use it as a wedge to get power, then it's okay. I didn't do that. I didn't do that. I went out and got the vaccine. I got double jabbed.
So let me be clear. I trust vaccines. I trust scientists, but I don't trust Donald Trump.
There's a guy who is fomenting vaccine hesitancy.
This moment, the American people can't either.
They can't trust the president. So you can't. He's saying, how could you trust the vac? What? Hey, here's the guy who the shit libs gave an Emmy, who turned out to be the most unbelievable corrupt guy dealing with COVID. Turned out to be horrible, a liar, killed, responsible for the deaths of thousands of elderly people. This guy. Here's what he said.
Is the vaccine safe? Frankly, I'm not going to trust the federal government's opinion.
That's the guy they gave. Everybody was a member, homosexual. There he is creating vaccine hesitancy. But it was okay when Trump was president. Here we go. Here's more.
People don't trust the process. I don't trust the process. I don't trust the president. And I don't trust the FDA.
He doesn't trust the FDA. He doesn't trust the president. He doesn't trust the process. Who is fomenting vaccine hesitancy? I thought it was all rednecks. I thought it was all horse paste eating rednecks. No. Look who it is. It's your liberal elite shit libs. There's more.
Would you get it? Well, I think that's going to be an issue for all of us. I will say that I would not trust Donald Trump.
So she's being asked if she's going to get the vaccine. Did you see her answer?
Would you get it? Well, I think that's going to be an issue for all of us.
It's going to be an issue for all of us. But apparently now, it doesn't matter if it's an issue for you. It's mandated.
I will say that I would not trust Donald Trump. If Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it. Would you get it?
Donald Trump told you to take it. Donald Trump is still telling people to take it. Donald Trump developed the vaccine with his Project Warp Speed. And every shit lib fomented vaccine hesitancy. And now there's vaccine hesitancy, and they're blaming workers. And if there's nothing wrong with the vaccine mandate, why would people in Congress and their staff be exempt from it? Talk about not leading by example, huh? Who was fomenting vaccine hesitancy? It would be Congress and their staff.
Wow.
Congress and their staff is fomenting vaccine hesitancy. Not your neighbor, not a school bus driver, but Congress, the president, and his vice president. And here's one of the dumbest things that people still say. Here's Brian Seltzer from CNN. An unvaccinated minority that doesn't watch the news or trust the news. Why would they trust you guys? You've been lying about everything. An unvaccinated minority that doesn't watch the news or trust the news. You called ivermectin a medicine that's on the WHO list of essential medicines that has been prescribed to billions of people and saved billions of lives around the world. You called it horse paste at CNN. You gave medical misinformation on purpose. I saw you do it. You wonder why they don't trust you? Because you guys are fucking liars, and you're bought and paid for by the people you're supposed to be investigating and exposing. That's why. An unvaccinated minority that doesn't watch the news or trust the news is putting the vaccinated majority at undue risk. There's just no way around that reality. What? So you have by the way, if you get vaccinated, you can still get sick from COVID and you can still give it to somebody. So if you're vaccinated, you can still infect someone. How does that make you? So if there's a vaccinated person standing here and an unvaccinated person standing here, either one of them could be shedding the virus and making you sick. It could be the vaccinated person who's making you sick and not the unvaccinated person if they don't have COVID. You don't know. You have no idea who's infected and who's shedding. You have no idea because a vaccinated person, by the way, Duke University, they just had an outbreak. 300 and something people got the COVID. 8 of them were unvaccinated. The rest were vaccinated. It's like, hey, if other people don't use an umbrella, does that mean that mine won't work? So you have a vaccine Brian Stelter has no faith in his vaccine, none, because he's afraid of people who are unvaccinated, even though he could infect them. A vaccinated person could infect an unvaccinated person. And a vaccinated person could infect a vaccinated person. So it doesn't give you immunity from getting COVID, the vaccine, and it doesn't give you immunity from giving it to someone. So if both people can transfer the virus just as easily, and we've had outbreaks where most of the people who got sick were vaccinated, that doesn't make any, this fear of the unvaccinated doesn't make any sense. And as Dr. Robert Malone pointed out, that when you have an outbreak and a pandemic, you can't vaccinate your way out of this problem, which is what they're finding out in places like Israel, which is what they're finding out in places like Duke University, where something like 99% of the people are vaccinated, and they're still having outbreaks. This is the ruling elite not giving you Medicare for all, which would save 200,000 lives already. This is them telling you to go do a lockdown and not giving you your pay while they take $5 trillion and give it to the richest people in the country, while they break you and then get you kicked out of your houses so they can give your houses to Wall Street. Let's see how many foreclosures there are and how many houses Wall Street inherits, absorbs. So here's a professor of ethics from Canada, and I just want to play this for you. Here we go.
My name is Julie Panesi, and this message is about mandatory vaccinations. I am a professor of ethics at Huron College at the University of Western Ontario. It's one of the largest universities in Canada. Today, I'm going to teach you a short lesson on the universally accepted ethics of coercing people into medical procedures. I'll be the example. My employer has just mandated that I must get a vaccine for COVID-19. If I want to keep working at my job as a professor, I have to take this vaccine. Here's my conundrum. My school employs me to be an authority on the subject of ethics. I hold a PhD in ethics and ancient philosophy. And I'm here to tell you it's ethically wrong to coerce someone to take a vaccine. If it happens to you, you don't have to do it. If you don't want a COVID vaccine, don't take one. End of discussion. It's your own business. But that is not the approach of the University of Western Ontario, which has suddenly required that I be vaccinated immediately or not report for work. So with the school year beginning in a few days, I am facing imminent dismissal after 20 years on the job, because I will not submit to having an experimental vaccine injected into my body. I've had plenty of vaccines in my life, but I've never been forced to take one. It's always been my choice. I don't work in a high-risk environment. I'm not a doctor in an emergency room. I'm a teacher. I'm a university professor. My job is to teach students how to think critically, to ask questions that might expose a false argument. Questions like, says who? Who is the authority giving this order? Should I trust them with control over my body? As a professor, I don't have to watch the news to find out if the COVID vaccines are safe. I read medical journals, and I consult my colleagues who are professors of science and medicine. I've learned from doctors that there are serious questions about how safe these vaccines really are. There are questions about how well they work. Nobody's promising that I won't get COVID or transmit COVID if I get the vaccine. But ultimately, none of that matters to me, because I'm a professor of ethics and I'm a Canadian. I'm entitled to make choices about what does and does not enter my body, regardless of my reasons. If I'm allowed back into my university, it's my job to teach my students that this is wrong. I'm hired to teach them that it is ethically wrong to impose an experimental medical procedure as a condition of employment. This is my first and potentially my last lesson of the year. Ethics 101. In the spirit of Socrates, who was executed for asking questions, this lesson will consist of only one question. The answer is multiple choice. Please listen carefully. When a person has done the same job to the satisfaction of her employer for 20 years, is it right or is it wrong to suddenly demand that they submit to an unnecessary medical procedure in order to keep their job? In this case, the procedure is an injection of a substance that has not been fully tested for safety. It has not yet been shown to be effective. It is designed to prevent an illness that poses little threat to the employee. The employee is not allowed to ask questions. She may only submit to the procedure or be fired. To my first-year students, is this right or is this wrong? I already know the answer.
That was amazing, Julie.
Sorry. Sorry.
She was fired on September 7th. So she said that it's untested. The FDA would say it is tested. The FDA here in America would say that it is. In fact, they've given Pfizer, I don't know about Moderna, but Pfizer have gotten full approval. So that's what they would say. That's what the FDA says. So they would say it's not, it's gotten full approval. So it's not, they would say it's not experimental. They would say it's not whatever. So there you go. And again, we're not giving out medical advice. That's ethical advice about mandates. That's what we're talking about here. I'm with what the ACLU was saying last year. What they were saying in 2020 when Trump was president, they were saying that the mandates are bad. And who do they hurt the most? Of course, they hurt the poor people, workers, people of color. And it's dangerous. They were saying all that stuff. So I'm with the ACLU's real position, which was the one last year. And now they're just shit libs. Now the ACLU has just completely devolved. I'm with what Joe Biden was saying last year. I'm with what Nancy Pelosi was saying last year. I'm with Fauci. What Fauci was saying last year, I'm with them. Somehow everything switched. And no one gave a reason why. Why did Fauci change his mind on mandates? Why did Nancy Pelosi? Why did Joe Biden? They said you can't do it. And now they're saying you can. They said before you can't do this. Not like, well, we could do it, but we won't. They said you can't do it. Now they are. And you're not allowed to ask a question. If you're a worker and you're mandated to vet, can you go ask Joe Biden why he changed his mind, or Dr. Fauci? What, or Nancy Pelosi? Why did you change your mind? No, you're not allowed to ask those questions. So, and shame on all the shit libs who are showing their authoritarian ass. Because that's what this is. Holy F. So a lot of shit libs out there are very authoritarian. You saw people saying that the unvaccinated shouldn't get medical care. That was going around. That was on CNN. That was in the newspapers. That was on Jimmy Kimmel's show. That we shouldn't treat the unvaccinated. We should give them medical care. How about the obese? Because the people who seem to be dying from COVID are the obese and the elderly. So how about we just don't treat the obese? How about we don't treat smokers? How about if you're an alcoholic, you don't get health care? Where does it stop? How about if you eat too much sugary foods, you don't get health care? How about if you're a mountain climber, you don't get health care if you fall? Because you're doing danger. How about if you're a skydiver? How about if you're a skier, a water skier, and you hurt your, because you're taking risks. You're doing it to yourself. There's a bunch of, so where does it end? So that's ghoulish. And that's where we are. So the elite and the oligarchs have us now blaming each other for this COVID virus. We got Dr. Fauci lying about funding gain-of-function research at the Wuhan lab, but blame your neighbor. We got Dr. Fauci lying that he said masks don't work at the beginning of COVID. He said that. And he said people shouldn't be wearing them, even though he knew they did work and that you should be wearing them. Don't blame him. Blame your neighbor. Well, I ain't blaming my neighbor. And I'm going to hold the oligarchs responsible for the way they handled COVID. And I'm losing my patience with the oligarchy who won't give people health care during a deadly pandemic, which would save already 200,000 lives. So the next time you hear a politician try to shame your neighbor, you say, hey, why don't you give us fucking health care, you piece of shit? It's your fault, the way you handle this. The worst outcomes in the world are right here in the United States. Hey, we're going to be at Harlow's in Sacramento, October 3rd. We just added another show, 4 p.m. on October 3rd. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for tickets. And we're adding stand-up dates, too, all over the country. We're going to be doing a lot of stand-up shows. So make sure you check out jimmydorecomedy.com for all our shows.